Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Richest Men in Town podcast. I'm Mike Freeman, and along with my good friend and co-host Tyler Gould, we're excited to welcome you to our little podcast project. Tyler and I are just a couple of middle-aged husbands and dads driven to live our best lives. We want to be better every day, so here we'll be sitting down with great people. Not famous people, but great people that we admire, to learn their secret to living the rich life. Probably not the rich life you're thinking of. Our guests come in humbled and surprised at the invitation and hopefully leave feeling proud and grateful, realizing just how good they really have it. So pull up a chair, stay a while, and raise a glass with us as we toast our guests to the richest men in town.
All right,
Tyler, man, it is just funny how Richest Men in Town guests come to us, right? Tonight, we're hanging out with Chris Scott, who you never knew before our time together. And we're walking away, minds blown, right?
Yeah.
What is bouncing around in your noggin about Chris Scott and our time together tonight?
Well, you know, Chris is a therapist, right?
Right.
And he's doing a lot of good work with couples, with teenagers, with families. He's doing a lot of good with dads. He's doing a lot of really cool stuff. But I just loved his approach to, you know, how he's approaching life himself. He's very introspective, and he has this thought of how can I be better? And then I love the way he approaches gratitude in his life. It just made me want to be more intentional about how I approach what I'm thankful for in my life.
Yeah, so I'll skip the intro because the intro does get into Chris's work a little bit once they get into the meat of the episode, and we'll drop some things into the show notes. But yeah, man, I'm hanging out and this guy starts talking about his work, and I'm like, "What? Hold on, this is like the mission statement for Richest Men in Town. Like, get over here, right?"
Yeah,
and a few email nudges, and here we are. But like that idea of trying to help dads.
Yeah.
You know, like we got to get better at raising our hands and saying, "Hey, I'm struggling here. I could use some help." And Chris gets into some of the reluctance. Chris gets into some of his own personal experiences, and that call 12 years ago, 13 years ago, that call to be like, "This is your lane, brother. Like, this is your lane. Do the things for others that he's done for himself."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is the work. Doing
the
the work ourselves.
Yeah.
And then once we're in a position where maybe our wounds are healed up, now we know the pain, go out there and relieve that pain from other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, as a dad myself, I'm always looking for ways that I can, you know, be a little bit better. And I need as much help as I can get. And I was grateful for the conversation tonight. So I think if you're a father, if you're a potential father, or if you're living in a family unit, tonight's episode is going to resonate with you.
Well, and let's not even get started about his work in marriage counseling.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And by the time, I mean, he walks you through the whole, kind of does an autopsy on what happens to marriages that end up where he's trying to work with them and save them. Right. And it's like trying to get upstream on that issue and like, hey, get into that positive affirmation and check your ratio, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Check your ratio. What are you doing positive? What are you doing negative? And in marriage, a lot of negative is not doing positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I love, you know, at one point he talks about closing your eyes and thinking about what you love about your partner. And
right. That is some homework.
Absolutely.
Right? Now.
Absolutely.
And it comes from a place, right? It comes from a place where, again, what I love about this little podcast project we got going on is not from a place of perfect, right? It's not from a place of like, I got it all figured out. It's not from a place like I've never made a mistake before. Chris is real with us. And Chris comes from like, hey, let me talk to you about growing up.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Let me talk to you about my faith journey. Let me talk to you about some of the work that he's needed to do. And the timing could not be better, right? I know I'm supposed to meet Chris Scott. I know I reach out to Chris, and I know Chris feels that this is work that he's supposed to do to jump in and join join our town and join the conversation. We've talked, our guests have led us up to this moment. You know, you think about some of the folks that we've had on recently and the importance of therapy in their story. And here we are talking to Chris, who does this on a regular, using his skills, using his journey, his experiences to save people, right?
Yeah.
To throw out that lifeline and to help them in a sustainable way do the work that's going to help them be the best version of themselves.
Mike Freeman, thank you for introducing me to Chris Scott. I enjoyed it immensely, and it made for a good night.
Yeah. Remember the name, not just because it's going to be a classic episode, but because this guy's coming back to us.
Amen.
Right. This guy is going to come back to us. Check out the show notes. They're going to be robust. They got a lot of titles and a lot of resources, but I hope that we get something out of the work that Chris Scott invites us to do in this episode of The Richest Men in Town.
So let's just be curious and let's be hopeful, and let's it's a sad day, but let's be hopeful that things will change, right?
Yeah. I bet you Chris Scott's got some thoughts on this.
Ooh, yeah. I mean, look,
right?
It's heavy, man. It's heavy.
It's a heavy thing. But even just the idea of finding agreement where there's only been a long history of disagreement.
Yeah. And it's 100%.
And I can tell you right now, polarizing with rhetoric is not the answer.
No, I mean,
doubling down on where you are, not the answer.
Like, let's get in a room. Let's hug it out. Yeah, let's hug it out, and let's come to a common place, man.
I'm letting this guy in. Let's do it. Wonder if he likes mangoes.
Well, it's become one of our constant questions on The Richest Men in Town, man. So.
Chris Scott, welcome to The Richest Men in Town, man. How are you?
I'm well. How are you two?
We are good, man. We are good. We're a little fired up. I gotta warn you.
All right.
I gotta warn you. It's a little bit heavy. So you can just turn right around and be like, you know what? I'll see you guys on another night. Obviously, we are victims of the circumstances we find ourselves in the world right now with things that are happening. Tyler and I have take pride in the fact that we've been doing this a little over 100 episodes, and we have not really shown political colors or taken political sides or even gotten political. But we're just thinking, surely folks can get in a room and come to an agreement that creates a different world and a different experience for our kids going to school.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'm thinking the answer might be 24/7 dads.
Could be. Nice. I like how you worked that in. I was waiting for the heaviness, and I was like, well, just like work. I mean, right? I sit with that all day. I'm ready to go, and then 24/7.
I honestly, I was joking before you came on, but I really believe that your work probably teaches you something about using curiosity to bring opposing viewpoints together.
For sure. I think that's one of the biggest lessons that I've learned in this is, it's the understanding of our point of view that's the problem. It's not the position, it's our inability to understand the position. So, I mean, if I could use like a hot topic like COVID, right? And this is just one position, right? But people who wanted the vaccination, they wanted to feel safe. People who don't want the vaccination want to feel safe. They're just in disagreement on how they feel safe. And then we're trying to persuade somebody else off their core value without having a conversation about, well, tell me more about that.
Right.
Tell me more about that.
I love that, man. I love that.
Well, we're on record as saying the more we get into folks in a spirit of curiosity, we're going to find that those differences really do magically kind of stem from similarities, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, hey, so Tyler,
yes,
I'm excited to have the opportunity to get to know Chris Scott a little bit. I actually met him through work, right?
Okay.
So we're hanging out in a common space, and he's talking a little bit about some of the support that he's offering schools to support families, and then specifically, I hear support for dads who feel like maybe they're struggling and don't have the instruction manual. And I'm like, I think that's me. And I think that's my podcast that I do every week. So I shoot Chris an email and he's gracious enough to join us. So I can't wait. Tyler, Chris, Tyler, let's jump in and do this thing.
I'm excited to spend some time with you and get to know you, Chris, for sure, man.
So
No,
Chris,
absolutely.
you've got a counseling group. You wanted to give us a little spiel about elevator speech about what works looks like these days.
Yeah, so I'm a group practice owner of Guidepost Marriage Therapy here in Redding, California. We actually have a DBA called Guidepost Counseling for Wellness. I interchange those two often because when I use marriage therapy, people are like, so all you do is marriage? I'm like, no, we do anxiety and depression and PTSD and relationships. And so it's more of a counseling center for wellness. And then my side hustle is really creating things to help dads. And this was something that was put on my heart 13 years ago. At a moment of movement with Jesus, and I have not been faithful. So it seems like I've done everything but the thing that he asked me to do. But really, just getting into it now, it's been such a breath of fresh air. So that's what I do. I help people find their way to better mental health through relationships.
Okay,
So Chris, what we do is we love to interrupt people and just stop and say, hold on, what did you say? Let's spend 2 hours talking about one of those bullets, right?
Yeah, and there's a lot to talk about as far as mental health, and I want to spend some time, Chris, digging into that a little bit and where that passion comes from for you. But can we circle back to the side hustle for a second and talk about where does that come from? This desire to create something for dads.
Man, do you have hours?
Yeah, we do actually. You've come to the right place, man.
You just coined a term. I love that thought of moment of movement.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Talk to me.
So, okay, if we're talking about, when you talk about little hinges, like I've heard the quote, big doors swing on little hinges.
Mm-hmm.
But I do like how you say life does swing on little hinges. So it was roughly, what am I now? I'm 46 now. So I was in my mid 30s and I was
I'm in the 46 club as well. I'm about to leave it next Friday. So, you know.
Congratulations. I just got into it in April.
Okay.
So I was sitting there finishing up my bachelor's at Simpson, and I'm sitting there like, what am I going to do? Right? What is that I want to do? And at that time I was reading a bunch of John Eldredge. I had just come back to my faith. I was born and raised Catholic. I was raised Catholic. And, did the whole altar boy thing, the communion thing, and kind of just fell away from that through some family dynamic issues that I'm sure we'll talk about later. And then when I went to Simpson, I refound my faith when reading C.S. Lewis's book, Mere Christianity. And he gave me a completely different view on Jesus. And it was in that moment, I'm like, I'm back, like, tell me more. And then I just started devouring books, because I think my experience was, if you're not Catholic, you're not saved. So I didn't know that there was all these other denominations, right? So after reading C.S. Lewis and being around the Simpson crowd, like I really found a way forward. And then reading just every John Eldredge book that I could get my hand on.
Wild at Heart has come up frequently in these conversations.
Mm-hmm. Wild at Heart, Fathered by God, Walking with God, Journey of Desire. Like I've read them all. Like Jesus, Beautiful Outlaw, love that book. Right. And so he just really changed my perspective. So I'm sitting here and I'm with my girlfriend, who's now my wife. And I'm sitting here like, what am I going to do? Like, do I go to National and get my master's in history because I want to be a school teacher? But I don't know if that's what I want to do. I don't know if I want to go to National. And I'm sitting there in prayer and I'm hearing like, go work with men. Go work with dads. Go heal other men the way you've been healed. You had a terrible experience in your teenage years with mental health and being in a psychiatric hospital because you were suicidal. You had a terrible experience with that. Go make a difference. So I was like, what? Where is this coming from? Like, this is just crazy, right? It's just out of left field. So again, I didn't want to go to national. So I went and I talked to the head of the Aspire at the time. His name was Brian. I'm like, hey, like, what do I do? This is kind of like the word I got. What should I do here? I'm like, can I get another bachelor's? He's like, no, really, you need a master's. I'm like, well, where would I get that? He's like, national. I'm like, I don't want to go to national. What do I do? And he's like, I don't know, man. He's like, those are your choices. Like national, travel somewhere. And I'm like, I can't travel anywhere. I have a house. So a couple of weeks later, he calls me up. He's like, hey, we just got approved. Approved for what? We got a master's program in counseling psychology. And I'm like, I knew I wasn't supposed to go to national. Like I knew I was like, you know, and is it that hindsight bias? But it was kind of that feeling like I'm not supposed to go to national. Right. And that kind of started my journey into counseling psychology, like getting my degree, my master's degree, and being a therapist. And it was, you know, the saying, the old saying, like you go to get your degree in therapy so you can heal yourself. Like I'll own it. Like it was so transformative. Like I would not be here sitting in front of you two today had it not been for that program. And in that moment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm curious, like when you have this thought, like I want to work with dads, right? At the time, were you a father?
No.
Yeah. Okay. So you're not a father. All right. So
no.
What I'm curious about is I feel like when we have these moments, right, that at least I'll speak from my own experience, right? When I have these kind of thoughts that I feel a sense of urgency to start or to continue with, it's usually because there's some experiences that have weighed on me and maybe surfaced, and I want to be able to address those things. So I'm curious, when you're looking at dads and fatherhood and kind of diving into that work, were there things that in your life where you thought, these are my experiences, this is where I want to help people?
Well, I think it was a part of that helping people process, and just my experience in my teenage years with, you know, the therapist that I had at that time, that was a major factor of be better than what I got. Right. And those were kind of some underlying maybe subtopics, like go be better, give people things that you didn't get, you know, work with men, help them heal their hearts. You know, there's a lot of hurting people out there. Like, this is what I want you to do. And I was getting married. I graduated in 11. I got married in 10. We had our daughter in 12. Okay. So it wasn't like out of the scope, right?
Right. Yeah. It's on the radar anyway. Right. And let me ask this question, and I don't mean this to be tongue in cheek at all, but how is it received? Right? You're talking to a group of people that don't want to pull over and ask for directions, right? So how do you get a group of men to say, hey, I'll take one of those guidebooks or manuals on how to be a better father, right? I told Mike before you came on, I'm like, well, a dad that says I don't need a handbook needs a handbook, right? That's probably sign number one, right? So how do you get these stubborn guys like me to say, hey, I need some help? Well,
it's that long process. It's the long process of creating the evangelicals, right? I have been a therapist now for 12 years, right? So it's building that, I guess, social proof. Like, hey, that guy really does have a good heart. He puts it out there every day for us. Like people, I can't say all people, right? But a lot of people, if they come to me, they know I'm giving my all the time. So you're right, though. Like, I talk to other people, like, hey, help me to find dads, help me to recruit dads, and I'm like, good luck. Like that's like their first response. Like, I was talking to this one gentleman who used to be a pastor, but now owns a marketing company, and it's a pretty prestigious marketing company. And I was telling him, like, this is what I really need help with. Like, how do I tap this market so I'm not like burning the candle at both ends, just trying to recruit dads? And he's like, good luck. He's like, when I was a pastor, it was like our message, our little in was you reach dads through their kids. He's like, you don't have that. So he's like,
but I think it's interesting. Yeah. And I totally agree. But I also think that I mean, Mike and I talk a lot about this idea of vulnerability, right? And so for 100 and however many episodes, Mike, we've had people come on this show, and through the course of a conversation, we get into topics that maybe they didn't think they were going to get into, and bonds are created right away, and the three of us feel a closeness and a desire to kind of share with each other and build each other up. So I would imagine, as a father, if I'm around other fathers, right, that are in the same boat, I mean, that's sort of my rocket fuel to get me to sign up and say, how do I be more like Mike, or how do I be more like Chris? You know, that's my thought, right?
You know, my thinking too is I'm thinking of some of the guests and this idea of your relationship with the Savior and owning the wounds, right? Like I listened to a keynote speech by Father Greg Boyle a while back, and he's Homeboy Industries, right? Largest gang rehabilitation program in the world. And he was talking about somebody who he had worked with, and was telling us this reformed gang member was telling his story about how he used to go to school every day with 3 T-shirts on, because the blood from his whippings on the back would bleed through the first, the second would kind of soak it up, and the third would be okay. And everyone at school would razz him and give him a hard time about 3 T-shirts. And here he lived every day hiding his scars. And he talks about this healing process. And I love that word, Chris, that you used about being about healing, right? Because he said once he could own what was happening, then he could be healed from what was happening. And now he's proud of what he's been through. And I think hypothetically, there's a lot of guys going through life with 3 T-shirts on, right? The life's beating them up, and they don't want to, that vulnerability, right? They don't want to let people in that they're struggling. And Chris, I love the timing of you coming into our lives in this podcast, because it's perfect with our former guests, our most recent guests have been kind of building to a crescendo of having this conversation, because we've been talking about prison, right? We've been talking about mistakes and atoning for mistakes. And we've been talking about suicide and suicide prevention and raising awareness. And we've been talking about dads struggling, mustering up the courage to pick up the phone and call a counselor and a therapist, right? And Tyler and I have been banging on that drum that we all need this. This isn't a thing like something's wrong, go get therapy. It's life's complicated. We're complicated. Our histories are complicated.
Change your oil, right?
Yeah. And so I think that this idea of owning stuff so that we can sit in it, look around and understand it. And then we can, like, I love that thought of building evangelicals, right? Because then you can proclaim loudly what he did for you, because you know what you brought to him. Right. And I think that there's something powerful about that. But I'm thinking of that, the way you kind of shared just iceberg, right? We got some time to dig deep here a little bit, but when you talked about this healing other men like you've been healed, can you talk to me about that word and what that is? That a one-time thing? Is that a process? Is that a journey? What does that look like for you?
So it totally is a process, right? And I think one of my favorite quotes that I've been really banging the drum on lately is like, who do I need to become to have the life that I want? Right. So it used to be, who do I need to become to have the marriage that I want? And that was the process. And that was the focus of probably my first 5 years when I was in therapy, was learning how to master being a marriage therapist, not for my clients, but for me. Because like there's a lot of turmoil in my past, not knowing how to do relationship, manipulation, hurt, damage. There's a lot of hurt people because I was a hurt kid, right? And that functional child who learned how to hide his wounding and hide his pain hurt a lot of people. and became a dysfunctional adult who was very, very, and I totally ignored this. Like, I was an alcoholic, right? I would drink a 30 pack a week, and I handle a gin a week, but I worked and I went to school. I full-time job, full-time in school, getting straight A's. Like, I don't have a problem, right? But what am I doing? I'm just pushing the pain, right? And if we're talking about another hinge moment, it was sitting in my daughter's room. She's newborn, getting ready, like on my FMLA, to relax because, I work full time and I'm stressed out. And I hear this voice like, is this the man you want to be? Like, what? Is this you again? Right? Is this the man you want to be? What's going to happen? I'm going to sit here. I'm going to drink 6, 7 Coors Lights, and then I'm going to finish it off with a couple pints of gin and tonic. What's the big deal? Well, what's going to happen if something happens to your wife or to your daughter and you can't drive, you can't protect, you can't do the things that you need to do? I was done. I poured it out, and I was done that day. And this Memorial Day will be 10 years because my daughter's 10. Right?
That's
but
awesome.
the benefit of that has been my other 2 sons, right? So I have a 10-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 5-year-old, and they're not going to see that side of me because it's not here. But to answer that question, like, it's been a lifelong process. And as I mastered relational therapy, and not that I don't have more to go, like I blowtorch the marriage every now and then, right? Like, but kids are a whole different
I don't know what
animal.
you're talking about. No one, Tyler and I have no experience with that at all.
Yeah. My wife will
Kids
not
are-
be a guest on this podcast anytime soon.
But for some reason, why do we believe we don't need any help with kids?
Yeah, 100%.
Like,
But the
what
interesting
is-
thing is, you get a group of guys together and you have this discussion like we're having now. I can't tell you. I mean, I'm listening to Mike. I'm asking him, what's going on with your kids? How do I pass that on to my kids? What do we? Those conversations are happening, but it's getting that conversation going. That's the
Right.
hard part, right? I'm not sure why that is the case, but it's ego, it's pride, it's maybe culturally we're told we've got to have all the answers, have it together, and asking that question or it is a sign of weakness, of doubt, of maybe confessing an inability that we might have, right?
Sure.
And believe me, I speak from personal experience because all of those things are in my head when I've found myself knowing like, dude, you got to make some changes, or you need to ask somebody. You got to pull over and get directions. But yeah, that's a battle.
Read a book.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Like, just getting a dad or to read a parenting book. It's like, have you ever read a parenting book? No, I'm good. Like, where did you learn how to parent?
Hey, drop us one. What would you recommend? We can put it in the show notes. Maybe you can give one away.
Read Love and Logic.
Yeah.
Parenting with Love and Logic. I mean, it's a system,
Yeah.
right?
And guys love systems, right?
It's interesting that you phrase it that way, that it's a system. I love that thought. If we thought that we could sit down and learn how to tear apart the engine and then put it back together, right? That's a powerful thing. I love that thought.
But it's also getting beyond the behavior, right? I think you guys probably know, like, when a kid acts out, we blame the behavior because of the pain it creates, and we don't have the system to deal with it. Like, the kid isn't the problem. Like, you as the parent isn't the problem. It's how you're doing the relationship that's the problem. Fix the relationship, you fix the behavior problems. I don't know if you agree with that, Mike, being
100%. No, 100%.
being within the school system.
No, I love, and I think that so many times the relationship is the first thing to be sacrificed.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times it is that we get accused of not listening because we're trying to fix it, right? And I think that's 100%. I think that's spot on. I mean, right. I personify that stereotype all the time, but in the fixing, you don't have time for relationships.
No.
Right? Because you got a task, you got a box to check, you got to, right? And I think that if we can just stop and say, be here now and listen to your kid.
Right.
right? Listen to your kid and ask questions, not about the behavior, but what's going on that is manifesting the behavior. Because the behavior, again, to that iceberg mentality, the behavior is what you're seeing above the water. There's so much going on. And I think one of the reasons, almost maybe even subconsciously, we don't ask because we're afraid that under the water, we might find our fingerprints. Right.
Well, I agree with you 100%, Mike. But I will tell you, I have four children. Okay. They're rapidly leaving my home, right? And I still
Chris
find
Scott, hey Chris, he's not going to say it. They're fantastic kids. Right?
They're very
fantastic
very
kids.
But I do find myself when those moments arise, reacting first, as opposed to, hey, let's work this out, right? Right. There's certain expectations that I put on them, right? And rather than saying, hey, where are you coming from with this? And
in full vulnerability.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out and say sometimes my reaction and my expectations are about me.
Oh, 100%. Absolutely right. Right.
Right. Like
if I'm questioning my kids, it's because
mine.
Yeah. I don't want people looking at my kids going, is that Tyler? Right? Is that Tyler that way?
But I mean, that's ego, and ego's the enemy, right?
100%.
Right.
Yeah. So I love what you're talking about. And I think that, obviously Mike and I are part of this podcast, really kind of, you could take over our duties, Chris, because this really is what this is about. It's about,
and that's what even got us into the game, right?
Absolutely. How do we figure out how to become maybe not even the best, but a better version of who we are, and how do we find that? And there's work involved. And I think that's what I want to get into with you is, as you've kind of put these things into practice, what does that work look like for you when you look at yourself and say, hey, I'm practicing what I preach.
Right.
And you've kind of hinted at some things in your childhood. Can we maybe put a pin in that question and back up and talk about maybe
let me double up on that question, right?
Yeah.
I'd also love to know systematically, how do you realize you're off? Like feedback loop, right? Like who in your world is giving you feedback, or what does that accountability look like? Because we all have a tendency with life's bumps to get off of alignment. I just love to be able to systematically, learn from you what that might look like for dads.
Chris, Mike and I are looking for a therapy session right now, just so you know. This is what we're doing right now. So.
Start your meter thing and we'll get this thing going. But no, hey, it's Richest Men in Town, and we do love that idea of,
for sure.
It's a Wonderful Life goes back to George Bailey on that frozen pond where stuff starts to happen in his childhood. Let's get into that a little bit. Talk to us a little bit. Where'd you grow up, and talk to us a little bit about what that looked like.
Okay. So I grew up in San Jose, born and raised, and things were cool until I became a teenager. And it was like, I remember sitting in our car, and I was 12, about to turn 13. And I'm like, Dad, why is everybody bringing up being a teenager? Like what's so significant about it? And I'll never forget what he said. He's like, I don't know, but I hear they go crazy. Like teenagers go crazy and life gets really hard. And that was a premonition. Like my dad, he worked two jobs to put me through private school. I also played ice hockey, not the cheapest sport on the planet. Like by far, it was probably one of the most expensive. If you think golf's expensive, be an ice hockey goalie, right? And it's astronomical. And they want my mom's Japanese, my dad's Caucasian. They met. He was on his way to Vietnam. They met in Hawaii, got married. He shipped off to Vietnam. And I guess they knew each other like 72 hours, right?
Wow.
I don't know. And there was something that you had said in one of I think it was your first episode, right? About Steve Harvey. Like, who's your dad's dad?
Yeah.
Right? Do you know his name? No. Right? And so I can go like, I know my grandparents' name, but I know nothing about them. Right? So we were a very isolated family, and there was a lot of control, a lot of harsh discipline. Like, by today's standards, I'd probably be in foster care. Not from my dad, but from my mom. Because my dad was always working 2 jobs. He was never around. So there was no guidance.
And doing it for you.
For me, right? Because what's the narrative? Protect, provide, and discipline. Protect. He was in the military. Provide, work 2 jobs. Give my kid the most opportunity that I can give him. And discipline. Right? So wait till your dad gets home. And it wasn't always terrible, right? We had great trips. Like, we go to Illinois and visit his brothers and stuff like that. But if you ask me, like, what are the systems that I learned from my parents about parenting? It's all physical.
I'm curious.
Physical punishment. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm curious if that comment from your dad of, I don't know, they go crazy. I wonder if it's like they've been gearing up for that moment, right? It's like, hey, this is what we know. This is what we've been told. And so we're going to parent accordingly. That,
oh yeah, totally.
You're going to go crazy, and here we go. We're all in on protect, provide, and discipline, right?
And it was the 80s, right? It's like there wasn't podcasts, there weren't books, there were books, but it wasn't like, people didn't go to the bookstore to get self-help books, right?
Right.
So it was one of those things, like, they did the best they could, and they did love me.
Yeah.
Right. So through years of my own therapy, working through that and working through forgiveness, but also recognizing, like, what they gave me was woefully inadequate.
Yeah.
Right. So what is it around, how do I heal myself so I can be more present for my kids? And now what do I need to learn about my kids so I can show up as my best self for them?
Yeah.
Am I answering your questions?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think that they go crazy is almost like, I'm just going to throw my hands up in the air and not try to understand what's coming at me.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Right? As a parent, I've actually, I haven't said those same words, but that same sentiment has come out of my mouth, and I've had to backtrack in a private conversation with my wife and say, hey, we can't, like, let's correct each other. Like, we can't project what we think, right, on on our children. We talk about listen and kind of work through it with them. But yeah, I mean, I've been guilty of that. Like, this is nuts, and it can't continue, right? So,
and I'm the same way. Like, this is what I do for a living, and I know. But there are times when I'm triggered and I get wrapped up in my own story, and my heart rate gets above 100. And I know Gottman, diffuse physiological arousal. When your heart rate gets above 100, you start moving out of your prefrontal cortex, and you're in your limbic system, and you're going to start to get aggressive, fight, flight, freeze. And I know all this. And what do? Walk away? No. Right. Start screaming, right? No.
But I love the fact that, and I love the honesty of that, right? Because I think that
there's hope for us.
That's it, right? And I think that there's a lot of people, especially as dads, I think that we tend to be very hard on ourselves, right? Like, I want my kids to be better than me, and so I'm going to take maybe this square peg and jam it in the round hole and just, hope that I can make them fit a certain way. But I love the honesty of, hey, there's times where I've got to catch myself and step back and say, hey, look, it's okay to make a mistake as long as we recognize that mistake and figure out how to make a.
Or look at your Apple Watch, and your Apple Watch says, hey, this situation, your heart rate's up. You need to go for a walk.
Does it beep when you do that? It's like, dee.
I think you can set that alarm. Like, I don't want
that is redlining. That is redlining.
But then it's my responsibility to do something, not theirs.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Right. But we try to control our children as if they're the problem.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I love that.
So talk me through, you turned 13, right?
I did.
You turned 13 and help me through that journey.
Man, it was just a power struggle, right? Like my mom wanted 4.0s and I gave her 2.0s. Like she wanted me to do, it was like, who's going to win this battle? Because it really was a battle of wills, and it didn't turn out well for anybody. Like in ice hockey, I had a potential tryout for Rochester Institute of Technology. It's a D3 school out in New York. And I gave them my high school transcripts and like, sorry, bud, you have the skill, but your grades. And it wasn't until then I was like, oh man, this power struggle is not paying off. But then it was like time to double down, because now I'm angry. Like I'm more angry. Like you did this to me. Right. If you just would have laid off, if you would have so I'm just constantly blaming my mom for my struggles.
You were laying down C's and getting the 2.0 to spite your mom's expectations for the 4. And then you realize the 2.0 is closing doors that you wanted open. And in a natural teenage illogical way, that turns into anger for mom.
Mom did it.
Right. Mom did it.
Yeah.
Right. We're always projecting, like blame somebody else, because it's not my fault. Like if you didn't spank me like that, like I wouldn't be angry. Or if you didn't, call my teacher and tell her to give me extra homework and then give me detention because I didn't do the extra homework. Right. It's like, it was just a crap sandwich all around. Right. And but that was the parenting style back then, right? Control your kids. Totally. Make sure that they behave, and that was how she learned. And I got to imagine that her, because she was a Japanese woman in a household of 3 brothers, right? And she kind of shared with me later in life, like I was to be seen and not heard, and I was kind of like the maid. And I'm like, that's a really hard life too. Like that really sucks. Like I now have some empathy for you. And I'm like, I'm so sorry that our teenage years were so rough. Right. But that's on the other side of it.
Yeah. So what does that journey look like, going from the power struggle to getting to the other side? I mean, how does that, how do you get there? And how long does that journey take, I guess, to get to the other side?
Well, it took me 13 to 30.
Yeah.
Right. So like at 30, sitting there, like I got to do something different. So I actually moved from San Jose. I'm like, I'm out of here. Like everything was going up through the roof. Like I was in a sales job making $100,000 a year, could hardly afford anything. But then again, it's because my budgeting was terrible. Right. So I ended up moving up here because we used to spend our summers up here. My best friend's parents lived out in Tierra Oaks, and we come up here for a couple of weeks, and I just felt so much peace. I felt so much calm, and we would go houseboating, and it was just a great environment. And so there was a part of me, later I learned like, hey, I'm out of the chaos. So of course you're going to feel better, right? You're going to feel peace, and I could finally sleep through the night and things like that. But I ended up moving up here and kind of created the same cycle for myself. Ended up getting divorced because of, go ahead.
Yeah, let's get into that, right? Because I think that there's this myth that if I change my scene, I don't change anything about me.
Right.
But if I can just get into another area code.
It's one of those wherever I go, there I am kind of deal.
Yeah.
Totally.
Right.
But it's easy to say, but we all like, yeah, man, if I could just get away from this, all my problems are going to go away. And it's like, we don't work. Yeah. Wherever we go, there we are.
Yeah.
Right. And there you are with your habits, with your same mindsets, right?
Yep.
With your same disbeliefs in yourself or anything. And I'm not excited about how that story is unfolding, but I think that the truth and the principles that you just shared with our listeners is really important to highlight.
Yeah.
Because that is also a total dude thing. I'm going to go over here and I'm going to get out of this. Now I agree. Some relationships are toxic. And if we got bad people, sometimes removing ourselves from those relationships might help. But if our problem is us, right?
Right.
If we meet 10 jerks by 9 o'clock in the morning, chances are you're the jerk, right? And if we think we can just pack up and move and all of our problems are going to go away, it's not the case, right? I mean, I appreciate
for sure
Chris backing us up on that.
No, it's cool. And you're right. It's like, until I was able to look at myself and say I was the problem, like nothing was going to change. Right. And so I had
hard.
a thought
That's
there.
hard.
It is.
And that's not a one-time thing either.
No,
It's every day.
I was, Mike, it reminds me of our conversation with Lester that we had, and he talked about looking himself in the mirror and really being honest about his own role in all of the problems that he'd experienced. And I was telling Lester, I'm like, I love that idea, but it terrifies me at the same time.
Yeah.
I think
that what's on the other side of that?
Yeah. Right. Digging into that dirt.
Because it's work.
100%. You're 100% right, Chris. The power that is on the other side of that is amazing, but the work that it takes to get there, as Mike says, it's work, right?
Yeah.
That's so. As you're getting to that spot, as you kind of have this moment of self-discovery, where does that lead you when you're looking at, I got to make some changes, maybe the problem is me? How do you address that?
Well, I think it was saying, look, I am the problem and I got to do something different, right? But I still hadn't learned that lesson, that it wasn't what I was doing, it was who I was being. Right. And that's the biggest thing that I've learned over probably the last 5 years of life. It's not what I'm doing, it's who I'm being.
I like that. Yeah.
Right. So it's not a doing problem. Most people don't have a doing problem. They have a who I'm being problem.
Oh man, that is so Stephen Lawson.
It is. Can you kind of
beings? We're not human doings.
Yeah.
Right.
Can you sort of dissect that a little bit and explain that a little bit more? I love that idea. It's not what I'm doing, it's who I'm being. Can you kind of give a little more background into that?
So if I'm wanting to, I think let me premise this. I think most men are in a relationship, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. Most men have this belief. It's a core belief: happy wife, happy life.
Mm-hmm. Right.
That's what they were raised on.
Yeah.
Right. So if I do everything I'm supposed to do, then I will have a happy wife. Right. I was doing a marriage training by Terry Real, and he was saying women will report that they are not happy in their marriage. Men will report that their marriage is fine, that they're unhappy, that their wife's unhappy. And that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Right. So if I'm doing marriage, tell me what to do, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. My wife doesn't want to raise another kid.
Come on.
Yeah, I like that.
Right. And then if I do all the things that I'm supposed to do, because I believe in, quid pro quo, like, oh, I did all these things for you, now you owe me.
Almost like Pavlov dog, right? I'm going to do this thing and I'm going to get my treat.
Right.
I'm going to do this
so
thing,
you owe me
I'm
sex,
get my treat.
you owe me.
Yeah.
Right. And now we're pissed off because we're not having the sex that we want, or the connection that we want, or I can't watch the game that I want because you have this honey-do list for me. But I've created this environment. I've trained my wife to give me this honey-do list because tell me what to do, tell me what to do, tell me what to do. And now I resent her.
So it's just a total transactional relationship at this point.
Right. But if I listen to my wife to understand my wife, then I become somebody that my wife wants to be around. Then I become like, check this out with my son. He is he's a gentle kid. Like I believe he's a highly sensitive person. He's an empath. He loves animals. I went down to the bow range a couple months ago, and they were having a shoot. We didn't know they were having a shoot. Right. And on the targets are animals. And as we're leaving, he's like, Dad. And I'm like, what? He's like, there are animals on those targets. I'm like, yeah, I know. He's like, I don't like that. Right? Now, if I'm wrapped up in what I want my son to be, I want you to be tough and masculine. Like, I'm going to minimize him. I'm going to tell him he's being silly, or it's not a big deal because they're just animals on our target, but they're not. Because I listen to understand, and because of who I am trying to be, I'm like, what do those animals on those targets represent? They're his pets.
Yeah, I love that tender heart, man. That's a very cool thing.
There'll be time enough later. He's 5 or 6, 7 at that time.
Right.
There'll be time enough later to harden him up.
Yeah.
If that's what he needs, but he doesn't need that.
Yeah.
But if I'm worried about what I'm doing versus who I'm being, then I'm going to try to change who he is and the person God created him to be to fit the model of who I want him to be.
And you, as his dad, are going to toughen his heart.
Yeah.
Right?
In other ways.
And I think of David Hill and the episodes that we've had with him about guarding that heart and trying to keep it soft, and the world is coming at your heart, trying to harden it. So we stop caring about other people. And sometimes in our own parenting to our kid, we're saying, toughen up, kid. Right.
So
I've said that so many times. It's crazy.
And they're like, okay, Dad, I want to be like you hard-hearted.
You SOB.
Right. Well, let me throw it out this way.
I gotta
right?
listen.
So,
I'm listening to Chris, and I'm just repenting right now.
Oh, it's 100%. Yeah, 100%.
another great book by Gordon Neufeld. Hold on to your kids. Why parents need to matter more than their peers.
I love that thought.
So think of it this way: if I harden this kid's heart, and he becomes resentful of me, where's he going to go? He's going to go to people who he can get that need met. He's going to go to his peers. Now, what influence am I going to have in his life?
Because they're seeking love.
Right. They're seeking love. They're seeking acceptance. They're seeking validation.
Yeah.
So they're going to go find kids. They're going to go find peers. And now peers are going to be teaching my son how to live his life without understanding what life is.
No good lessons come from the baseball dugout. I'm telling you right now. No good life lessons come from the baseball dugout.
Okay, life lessons, because I know a few tricks from those baseball dugouts.
But if I let him go into the world and the world hurts him, and I give him validation, approval, and honesty and love and nurturance, who's he going to turn to? Me.
Yeah.
Now I'm going to be able to influence him and say, well, tell me how that kid hurt you. And what do you think about that? How does that impact your character? What does that say about that person? Who is it that you want to be when you grow up? Is that how you want to treat people? And now I'm going to have an amazing car ride or amazing dinner or an amazing camping trip talking about life issues in a place where I am now going to be honored, valued, and respected because my kid knows that I'm putting him above my desire for him. And
it's your focus on who am I being, and not what am I
doing.
Yeah.
Chris, what are you doing next week? Let's just keep this thing.
Hey, Chris,
I think so many
go
times
ahead, Mike.
we get into this, like close-ended conversations with our kids. Like, and we're the one closing it. They ask us a question and we're like, let's get this thing done so I can, and I love that idea of like the way we treat our kids, keeping that open-ended so that they come back for more. Mm-hmm. Tyler, you threw out a joke at the beginning of the episode, just like leave them wanting more, right? Like,
yeah.
If we could have a situation where that door is always open.
Yep. Hey,
son, you can always come here and we can have these conversations versus, nope, got it. And then pretty soon they don't even knock anymore.
Yeah.
Right.
Chris, I want to backtrack a little bit. You said earlier when you were talking about kind of the growth that you've had over the years, you said you mentioned the idea of forgiveness and the role that played. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Tell me more.
So when you talk
therapist response, tell me more about that.
Yeah, when you talk about the role of forgiveness and becoming who you are and who you want to be, right?
Sure.
What does that journey look like? I mean, it sounds like, you spent your teenage years kind of clashing with your parents, and then you made the comment that, now that I understand where my mom was coming from, it's kind of you're to be seen and not heard. I developed some empathy there. What does forgiveness, that journey of forgiveness, look like for you with your parents?
Well, it's not really letting them off the hook, but it's really understanding that they did the best that they could. And I can't hold them accountable for something that they didn't know. And here's another book. I was reading The Fatherhood Factor by Monroe. I think he's a pastor in the Philippines. And he said something really profound that I was reading is like, we're sitting here and we're holding grudges against our parents. Right. And he's like, God's going to take care of that. He's like, you don't have to hold them accountable for anything. God will hold them accountable. But the problem is because you've hardened your heart or you have resentments, God's also going to hold you accountable to resenting your parents for what they did to you. And I was like, what? Like, how's that possible? And he was like, you were commanded to love, not resent. And I was like, oh, that's true. How do I love my mom regardless? Because really all I was focused on was all the hardship. There were times where she came through for me. There were times where she stuck up for me. There were times where she did special things for me. Right?
Yeah.
There were times when she didn't, and those were painful. But there were times when I remember her when, believe it or not, like she played with my hair. Right. And as I was watching cartoons with my head in her lap, like that's a tender moment.
Yeah.
Like I can't throw everything out just because I'm traumatized or injured by the things that she did. Like, do my own work, heal myself.
Yeah.
Because if I'm angry at my mom, then I'm going to project that on my kids too.
Yeah. And it just, as you're talking, there's a quote by John, by the way, Mike, and he says, holding a grudge is like drinking poison and hoping the other person dies. Right.
For sure.
So, yeah. So
and it's also like, it's almost like I've got two choices of lenses to wear.
Yeah.
Right. When I choose resentment, it blocks out every service, every love. When I pick up love, I don't remember the resentment.
Yeah.
And I think every day we have a choice. Like, what are we, how are we going to look at this world, and how are we going to look at our, our people and the way that we interact. And now, Chris, can we talk a little bit about, it sounded like you hit bottom. Teenagers there, you were talking a little bit about maybe giving up, feeling like you wanted to give up.
Yeah, that came around. Like, part of me is like, okay, how true was that? My cousin had
and everything
through
in teenage, right? Everything in teenagers amplified. The best is the best and the worst is the worst, right? So I think that there's some of that.
Peaks and valleys are huge.
For sure. Like the swings are
the
swings are all over the place. But there was a point where like I was like, I think it would be better if I wasn't here. Like I'm really tired of this. And I remember my mom was going to a therapist, and she brought me along. And I happened just to tell my therapist, like, there are times where like it's just so bad. Like I just want to kill myself. And she didn't really ask any follow-up questions. She just called it 5150. Right. So now I'm in the back of this police car. Like, what the hell did I just do? Right. I'm embarrassed. I'm scared. And then I go to like the intake facility where there are true mental health people, like banging their head against the table and the wall. And I'm like, holy smokes, I'm never going to say anything again. Like, this is terrifying. But then I ended up like the school counselor, and she had a connection with a volunteer inpatient facility. Right. So I ended up there for a while with, major depressive disorder, started Prozac and things like that. But the problem is while I was getting the support, I don't know what my parents got. Right. So when I got out, it's like I was in juvie. When I got out, actually, when my dad's insurance ran out, I got out.
There you go.
Which I'm kind of bitter about, because one of the counselors was like, yeah, you're getting out soon. Like, why? Like, am I good? She's like, I don't know. There's a problem with the insurance. So I'm like,
Yeah.
right now as an adult, I'm putting that together. Like,
Right.
like, is that something you're going to tell a 16-year-old?
Yeah.
But I don't know like what support they got, because not much changed.
Mm.
Right. So, I often tell people like therapy doesn't work for kids because we put them back in the same environment. It's the parents that need the support.
That's an interesting thought, though. That's a really interesting thought. I think that idea of, because I think there's a lot of times where we say, you need to be in therapy, or, it's like picking these different things. And then you come back to me and we'll have a conversation. Meanwhile, I'm still doing the same dang freaking thing that probably drove you to the behaviors, right?
That's the story that you hear when parents take kids off to like, no offense to the state of Utah, but like Utah boy ranches and like these non-public places where I can't handle my kid anymore. He's in drugs, he's in juvenile hall, whatever. I'm going to ship him off. And so the parents take them and drop them off, and they think, okay, we'll be back. And they're like, no. You need to go in this room.
Yes.
And they're like, what are you talking about? He's like, well, your kid is going to go over here,
and you're going over here.
And we're going to have a conversation about what's going on, right? And they're like, well, the problem isn't with me, it's with my kid. It's like, just come on over here. You
just signed up for five more sessions with that comment.
Right. You had no idea.
It's so true.
Yeah.
If we're trying to support kids, and I think even, in work with schools, if we're not also supporting the adults in the kids' lives, we're wasting precious time, wasting resources.
So then let me ask this question then. If you as a therapist, when you see families come to you, I mean, is that your first thought, is how can we address this as a whole unit? Maybe individually, but the whole unit needs addressing and not just an individual needs addressing?
I try.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm working with, I typically work with teenagers and up.
Mm-hmm.
So with teenagers, we can do more triage work, or we can do more self work. Like, what do you need to do to let go of the anger? What are things you can do to create, different thought processes, thinking, feeling, being, or thinking, feeling, doing type things.
Yeah.
Like, what are you looking forward to? How do you prepare to launch? Like, what do you need to learn in order to be successful? Right.
Okay,
because
you're rattling some things off here, and these are like baiting us, right? Like each of these we could probably dig into a little bit. So thinking, feeling, doing, right? So thinking, feeling, doing, like, our thoughts affect our feelings, affect our behaviors, but vice versa too. Like, our behaviors affect our feelings, affect our thoughts. So how do we become more aware of those things? So with teenagers, it's a little bit different. Like, if they're older, then you can help guide them to more helpful outcomes. But if they're younger, it's like, what do I need to do to get these parents involved? Right. And sometimes, like, when I was first starting out, it was kind of like I started with the kids, and then I would bring the adults, and then I'd let the kid go. And then I would just have the adults.
Yeah.
Right. And then, I would have better results that way. I think that's family therapy can be very powerful. Now, finding a family therapist is pretty hard, because a lot of therapists like to work one-on-one, because it's easier to manage.
Sure.
Because when there's 3 stories, 4 stories happening in a room, and you have to sort them all out and figure out how they interact with one another, and then formulate a treatment plan based on the hypothesis around how people are. Sorry if that was too fast. It's exhausting.
Yeah. Interesting.
So listening to you share out some strategies, Chris, makes me think upstream, right? And it makes me think of a conversation that I had once with a church leader. I was called to be like a pastor, right? And he gave me some assurances. My kids were little, and I was concerned that the time away would impact them. And he assured me that that there would be some spiritual protection in my service. And I honestly think it was because I was going to see some things.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to see some things. I was going to see some how to do it. And I was going to see some consequences of how not to do it. And I would come running home and I would say, hey, Kelly, right, we need to make some changes because I just learned some things.
Yeah.
So are there insulating factors? Are there some things, preventative things that you do or share with parents, maybe even parents of young children, so that they can get ahead of it? Is that even a fair question?
No, it is a fair question, but people typically come to me when it's bad.
Yeah.
Things are broken.
Right. So
at that point.
right, things are broken. Like, so for marriages, there's typically a pattern of vilification, entrenchment into position, blaming the other, vilification, turning away, and then growing apart. And by the time they come to therapy, that process is roughly 6 years. Right. So now they're so entrenched in their position, it's a last ditch effort. And they're saying fix the other person because they're the problem. Mm-hmm. So they've been living in this dysfunction for 6 years. Like there's no preventative measures that can be given there. It's like, okay, are you willing to do the work? Because we can change if you're willing to, right? I think with like 24/7,
again, holding up the mirror, right?
Yeah.
You're holding up the mirror to them. I want you to talk to my partner. No. Here's the mirror.
Right.
Let's talk about you.
It's like, do you want me to be nice or do you want me to help you?
I would imagine that process of like, if you're willing to look in the mirror, mm-hmm. I mean, you're buying into the work, right?
Yeah.
To be done. But if you're not willing to look in the mirror and you're like, no, it's the partner. I mean, that's I'm assuming, and correct me if I'm wrong, but that's where therapy fails for a couple. When it's, hey, here we are, fix my partner, and then we can move forward.
Right.
But
I'll also frame it through the lens of, what are you trying to do to fix the problem that's making the problem worse?
Yeah. That's interesting. Yeah.
We almost get into that solutionitis, right?
Yeah.
Like quick fix. I'm going to do this thing. It's not the real work that needs to be done.
Right.
It's the, you mentioned your younger days of poor budgeting, right? And it's like, well, I'm out of money, so I'm just going to go get a high interest payday loan and that'll solve my problem and give me the cash that I need. Yeah, it gives you the cash that you need, but your system is broken and you're only getting further and further from the actual solution to life's problems, right? And I think that in relationships, a lot of times we do that. Well, I messed up, so I'm going to just hurry and do this thing that always makes it right. Well, it might make it right on a temporary basis,
right? But
it's not what you were talking about as far as it's doing marriage.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's not actually
we're back to the being.
Yeah. Not in the being. It's transactional and not transformative.
Correct.
Chris, what advice would you have for, so I'm interested in this because I've been married 25 years.
Yeah.
Maybe coming up on 26. I don't know. Don't let Ricky listen to this because I might be off by a year or so. but what advice would you give to married couples as far as preventative maintenance in a marriage, right? Because I don't want to be to the point where I'm looking over going, man, we better get something in here to fix this. Or it's
when it sounds like you said it's a 6-year drift.
Yeah.
Before they even end up seeing you.
Yeah. And I mean, just 25 years, my wife's a very patient lady, apparently. Right. So we got to talk about the preventative maintenance, but honestly, like, what would you say for that preventative care?
So this speaks to Gottman's work about his ratio of positive affect to negative affect. And we can make that a lot simpler. What are the positive messages that you're putting into your marriage and the negative messages? Right. And it doesn't have to be words. Like, even as you were saying, like, hey, don't share this with Ricky, you were laughing.
Yeah.
Like, if you were in distress, you wouldn't be laughing. You'd be like,
Yeah.
hey, man, like, seriously, don't share this, because if she hears it, I'm going to be in a world of hurt. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So
Yeah.
you'd be trying to protect.
There's been those
the
moments
bonds.
too. Let's be real. There's been those moments too.
But so his research shows, and like, he can tell if a couple is going to be married within 15 minutes of talking about a gridlock topic. Now, what is a gridlock topic? The gridlock topic is a problem that can't be solved. And here's the kicker: 70% of the problems in life can't be solved. And that's part of the problems we believe that we can.
Whoa.
Yeah.
70.
70.
70% of life's problems are actually not solvable.
They're called perpetual problems.
Interesting.
Is your budget solvable?
Oh, that's perpetual. That's perpetually
Right.
doomed.
Interesting.
Is your kid's language, is that solvable?
Interesting.
Is your wife's favorite restaurant, is that solvable? Maybe.
I've tried.
Maybe
man.
not.
No, it's not. No. It's
Favorite
life
movie?
unlocked.
All of a sudden, Kelly Freeman's falling out of love with Mexican food, Tyler.
Oh no.
That's
Yeah, it's not her
bad.
go-to. And then this whole time, I'm like, what do you mean it's not your go-to? Are you kidding me? I thought you liked Taco Bell cheese and chips.
That's why she doesn't like Mexican food. You're taking her to Taco Bell. That's interesting though, Chris, that idea, 70%. That's really interesting. Really interesting.
Well, you're spending some precious life energy solving a problem that isn't solvable.
Correct. So
And
go
then you're
back to
getting
that first
frustrated,
conversation.
right?
Right. Go back to that first conversation we had about the vaccination. You're trying to solve a problem where the value systems aren't going to align.
Yeah.
Period. So you're trying to change somebody's value system. Not going to happen. So how do we get to yes? What do we agree upon?
Right. We both want to be
Right.
safe. Right.
So that preventative measure in the marriage. So people who are unhappy in marriage but will stay married have a ratio of like 5 deposits to 1 withdrawal. The masters of marriage, his research shows, is 20 to 1.
Whoa.
Interesting.
But it's like the greeting at the door. It's maybe the cologne you wear. It's sharing a moment, watching the children play, and sharing a smile. Right? They're very some are covert, some are overt. Right? But if you close your eyes and you think about all the things that you love about your partner, you'll start to see them.
I love that. I really love that.
When it's almost like too, where when Jesus is with his disciples and he says, one of you is gonna betray me, and it's like, is it I? And I think if we lived in this healthy fear of like losing the flame, and we're constantly trying to guard and keep that flame, right? That romance. I am actually paranoid. I'm fine with growing old. I don't want to grow apathetic in my love and my romance towards my wife. Right. And that keeps that kind of stuff actually keeps me up, because I can feel it as I get older. It just kind of creeps in.
Just you got to transition from Taco Bell, man.
Right.
That's a big deal. That's a big deal.
You got to move it up.
I got to step it up. But I mean, I think that is.
There you go.
I think that's a healthy fear. And I'm not a fear guy. Tyler, we've talked, right? 2 Timothy, like that spirit of fear does not come from, but I think a reverence for what we do have, and a healthy effort to try to maintain that. Like, I'll be honest, I want to be 75 years old and tapping out of a movie early because we want to go make out.
Yeah.
Now I know that's not going to happen, but
Why
in my
not?
mind, that's what
Why
I'm
not?
trying. That's what I'm trying to chase, right?
But
Right.
I love that question, is it I? Because I think that question is all about self-examination.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that if we're engaged in this constant process of self-evaluating, right, against the most important things in our lives, like, where am I at as a dad? Where am I at as a partner, as a son, as you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I
What
think-
if is it I was taped to the mirror that you look at?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, man, kids' behavior, what's going on? What is my ownership in this?
That's interesting.
Right?
I like that. Yeah.
I mean, imagine if husband and wife came to see Chris and the first question was, is it me, Chris? What am I doing something? Like Chris he'd fall out of his chair, right?
Yeah.
Because at that point,
I know I'm screwing up here.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
There's this laundry list. Oh, I got a list of things that my partner's doing that I can't live with anymore. Versus like,
Right.
how about your list?
But I love that idea, Chris, that you bring up of, close your eyes and think about the things that you love about your partner. And that list will grow, right? We'll start to identify some of those. And I think that maybe that's part of this whole idea of like living a grateful life, right? If we're able to kind of sit back and, I tell my kids this all the time, right? It's like things are going to be crappy. But even in the crappy, we can kind of sit back and go, yeah, this is crappy, but man, look at all this stuff that's going on. That's good. Right. And then your mind starts to change a little bit.
Grateful in every circumstance, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of like that Corrie ten Boom hiding place where they're just like, I'm grateful for the fleas because the fleas kept the guards away. We could preach the gospel here, and they're like, fleas? What are you talking about? But it's like,
Yeah, totally.
I think that's a great homework assignment. Just that list of things that you love about your wife, right? It's powerful.
Like, I think gratitude, the way we do gratitude is more of praise than it is actually feeling the gratitude. Right.
Chris,
then
hold on. It cut out for a second. Can you just repeat that again about gratitude?
All right. Repeat what again? Sorry.
Can you
So
repeat?
you hit gratitude and praise.
Yeah.
And then you got a little choppy.
Sorry about that. So the gratitude we do it like praise, like, hey, thank you for this, thank you for this, thank you for this, and we just go down a list, right? But if we actually sat back and said, thank you, like, thank you for, geez, I'm blanking right now. So I think one of the moments that I really enjoy is watching my kids. Like, we go to Monterey. That's kind of like, moving up here was my peaceful place. Like, I have to go to Monterey every now and then.
Yeah.
And I think about the aquarium.
I'm with you.
I love
right.
that.
And I think about the aquarium and I'm like, okay, like, thank you, aquarium, for just being cool. Right? Because it is cool. But if I sit here and I say, thank you, aquarium, for having the stingrays, where I watched my son overcome his fear of touching an animal that he was kind of terrified of.
That.
Right now I'm getting emotional because I watched him go from just terrified and petrified to overcoming it, jumping up and down and screaming, I did it.
Love that. Yeah.
So I hear the sounds, I see what he's doing, I smell the aquarium, I see the cement, I see the birds, I look out the window and I see the sun and the Stanford Research Center across the way. I see the stingrays in the pool. I see my wife holding my 5-year-old and my daughter next to my son. Come on. Tell me that that's not gratitude.
Come on. You just answered one of our questions, right?
Oh,
Paint a
my
picture of a
gosh,
moment where you feel truly rich.
Right.
That's a moment.
I felt, and as you're talking about that, I felt like I was there, but I love that idea of, rather than just having this rote list of things you're grateful for, but really diving into the depths of that gratitude for those things. I love that. I appreciate.
And then you can flip that. You can flip that to him and say, son, I want you to know how proud of you I am. I want you to know that I'm overjoyed by your excitement. I want you to know that you didn't give up and that's a man of character. I want you to know that I saw you do that and struggle and come out on the other side. And then he's going to be like, dude, my dad sees me. He's not going to be like, cognitively, like, my dad sees me.
Right.
He's going to feel that.
Yeah. Man.
And if I keep doing that over and over and over and over again.
So Chris, you talked a little bit about you talked about your mom and dad. How do you honor your parents today?
So doing all the things that they wanted me to do when I was a kid. So, and this is something that I'm trying to teach my kids as well. So one of the things that my parents really got upset about was I never wanted to go home and help them. Right. It's like, but my cousins in Hawaii, my mom's from Maui, like whenever they had something that needed to be done, like everybody would flock and paint the house. Right. Or she has a brother in Fresno and they have a bunch of kids. And like when they needed something, everybody would pitch in and like buy them a car. Right. For a birthday present. I'm an only child. And there was a lot of things that, I didn't like doing. But now as an adult and they're older, my dad almost died like twice last year. He was having some breathing problems. So he can't do the things that he used to do. So I'll go over there. I'm like, hey, what do you need chainsawed? What do you need raked up? What do you need picked up? My dad needs his haircut. Let me cut your hair. And it's more of like going over there and telling my kids as we're going over there, hey, we're going to help grandma and grandpa today because we're family and we love each other and we need each other. That's from Love and Logic. Right. And we keep saying that we love each other and we need each other. And this is how we do it. We go over when people need help and we help them. So now I'm going over and like, filling up dump trailers worth of hedges and breaking that down for them and doing it from a place of joy and gratitude. Not because I'm trying to make it up for them, but because
you get
I
it.
want to.
Yeah.
I want to.
Yeah.
You get it.
Right.
I love that.
We can scratch this if this doesn't work out, but I'm just going to take a stab at this. Chris, are you a fan of the program on NBC called This Is Us?
I don't watch TV.
There you go.
I've
never seen it either.
Talk to me about this lifestyle. Talk to me about this lifestyle. Let's do a little spin. You don't watch TV.
I will play video games. I'm not going to lie. Like I do sedate with video games. Television just hasn't been a priority for me. Like when I was going through my master's program, like I would watch the Red Sox play baseball and that was about it. Like I didn't have time.
Yeah.
And then being a business owner, I didn't have time. And then over the past year and a half, just really with my desire to be the best version of myself, television doesn't work in there. Now, again, I'm not trying to be on this high horse and say I don't watch television. I'll watch some soccer. Like my kid they like to watch soccer. They like to watch the kids baking show. Like we'll watch things like that, or maybe Avatar. Like we have a 30-minute television before we go to bed. Right. And we'll watch a show together. So it's more kid appropriate than anything else. But really my morning routine is I get up, I meditate, I'll do some reading, and then I'm working on the dad project, or I'm working on, my business, my therapy business for a couple hours. And then I'm working out, then I'm in the hot tub, and in the hot tub, I'm doing like a Wim Hof breathing. And then I'm in the shower, and then I'm packing my lunch and kids are off to school and I'm at work. And typically I'm like winding down. Like right now, it's like I would be laying in bed with my wife, and I'm like asleep by 9:15.
Man, I first of all, I'm impressed by all of that.
I love the intentionality of all of that.
The only thing I'm not impressed with is watching the Red Sox games. You know what I mean? Like,
Not anymore.
Okay.
They're awful this year.
The best version of yourself, and TV just doesn't work into that.
Yeah, I love that. Shoot, I got work to do, Mike Freeman.
I mean, there's a few things that I'm hanging on to, and I would agree. Some of the things that I choose, like the Celtics game tonight, was terrible, Tyler Gould.
Dave, let's not talk about that because I got that on record.
Right? All right. Okay. But like sometimes I'm consuming this and I'm like, this is not helping me be the best version of myself. And I got limited resource. I got 24 hours in this day. And yeah, I just don't have, I don't have I got a character deficiency to reach for the remote, turn it off, and grab a book.
I'm liking that. I'm liking you're pointing out the incongruency of that, right? Because I agree. I mean, I agree. When I And I think we talked about this the other day. You know, when I'm busy and I'm focused, I'm hyper focused on things.
Mhm.
I feel more efficient. I feel more effective. I feel more, fulfilled. And when I delete some of those more fulfilling activities and plug in a little bit of Netflix, like it's not doing it for me, man.
You know what, Tyler? I'm hanging out at a church barbecue the other day, and
Yeah.
some young women come up and they have a cotton candy machine, and they come up and they're like, "Hey, Mike, you want some cotton candy?" And I try to teach them the lesson that there is no value to that, right? And and then in 5 minutes they come back by. I'm like, "Yeah, give me one of those."
Yeah.
Right? But
Make it a
there's
double.
so many times where there's things that I'm consuming in life, and it's like that. It's like cotton candy. There's no value in that. It's gonna take up my time. I'm gonna walk away no better for it. And I think that that's the call that Chris is throwing out there. So, hey, Chris,
I think the lesson,
Yeah.
dude, real
Yeah,
quick.
go ahead.
So we did lose our house in the car fire, and
there you go.
so during that time, like I was talking to my buddy about doing 75 hard. So I'm like, all right, I'm living in this house, like this rental house, like everything's a mess. I'm like, let me just start 75 hard. Like I didn't have TV because the TV was gone. Like I hadn't replaced it yet. So I started with that, reading 10 pages a day. Right. And then when I started to get the TV back, because I wanted to replace all the comforts after losing the fire, losing all my stuff, I couldn't work out for the 45 minutes, read my 10 pages and journal, and watch TV. I'm like, something had to go. And it was TV. And then I noticed after that 75 days, I'm like, I don't miss TV.
Oh, man.
And that was the start of it.
Okay, talk to me about 75 hard.
I'm not the man to talk to about that. So 75 hard is, I'm gonna skew. It's like, pick a diet, take your picture every day, drink a gallon of water, 2 45-minute workouts a day, and one of them has to be outside. Did I say read 10 pages? And that's the program.
Okay.
And you do it for 75 days. And if you miss one of those, you start over.
Yeah. Ooh.
So it's Andy Frisella. If you want to look him up, Andy Frisella, 75 hard. There's a gentleman in town that's kind of his lifestyle. His name is Josh Canalora. I don't know if you know him. He lives in Reading. He might be great on the show too.
Yeah, we'll hunt him down.
Yeah.
Wow.
75 hard. Well, it reminds me of that Covey principle with the jar, right? And the big rocks.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Is it full?
Yeah.
And then like, yeah, it's full. And you put in the gravel and then you put in the sand. And if you get the order wrong, none of it all fits in. And I think that
you're right.
I think that's a great reminder of life. Like there's some things out there that are going to help us and sharpen us. And if we're not given the time, you can't fit it in. Something's got to go.
Hey, Chris, from where you sit today, what gives you hope?
Man, people like really kind of get confused when I say I lost my house in the car fire, like everything. Like we had 3 bags because, the fire's not coming to town. Right. So we took 3 bags.
Chris, can we replay that really quick? Can we replay that just for listeners who, they're all over the world. So I just wanted to kind of highlight this, right? So there's a fire burning outside of the Reading area, and it's relatively harmless to the suburban town of Reading.
And give us the year.
City limits.
Give us the year on that.
2018.
2018, and we all go to bed one night, and I remember seeing a glow, and my wife says, "We're okay, right?" Yeah, we're okay. I live over here on West Reading, obviously not as west as you, but we all went to bed that night thinking we were fine. People woke up at 4 or 5 in the morning with people rapping on their doors saying, "You got to go." It quadrupled in size overnight, and by 9 o'clock that next night, it was burning in the city limits.
And that wind was gnarly.
Yeah.
Like there was the first fire in Ado. Like the firefighter got wrapped up in that, and he lost his life. He was a great guy too. Yeah. Right. So when I tell people like I lost my house in that fire, they're like, "Oh man, that must have been really hard." I'm like, best thing that ever happened to me. Exactly. And that's their face. Yeah. Because in that moment, I had to do things that I normally wouldn't do. And I had to face the fears of making mistakes, of figuring out what to do for my family. of having to resource. Like I could take care of myself. Like I could grieve, right? But I still went to work, and people are like, why are you at work? I'm like, well, because this office is all I own, and I'm looking for normalcy. Right. And so like, and then there was kind of some gallows humor. They're like, oh man, how was your weekend? Oh, I spent all weekend cleaning out my pool. There's so much ash. And I'm like, yeah, can you save some for my, that was my house. And they're like, oh, I can't believe I'm complaining about this.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm just kidding. Right. But through that whole process.
So counter, and that is so swimming upstream though.
It
right?
is.
The idea
but
of losing everything is the best thing that ever happened.
Right.
Wow.
And I learned, like, I took screwdrivers for granted. Like we got into a rental house, and like their faucet was loose, and I was like, oh, I just need to get a screwdriver. And I remember cursing, like, I don't even have a screwdriver. Like, holy smokes, like how much of my life am I taking for granted? And I've kind of fallen back into that trap 3 years later. But there were things like, hey, what do you need? Can we get you things? I'm like, yeah, I need a contractor and a place to live. Right. And just taking action after action after action. And I noticed, like, I wasn't anxious. I wasn't depressed, but I wasn't pushing it down. I was fully present, but taking action. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is like the secret. Taking something big and overwhelming and breaking it down into small bites.
It is counterintuitive, but at the same time, we've had guests on this show that talk about leaning into the process, and like really feeling that. And I feel that in your words, just kind of grabbing the bull by the horns, whatever it is you want to say, right? And just saying, I got to deal with this. I can't, like, me shrinking in the moment isn't going to get me where I need to be.
Well, you talk about gratitude being like praise and rattling off a list, and you're saying thank you to the car fire for
teaching me
the reinvention, right? For the teaching, for the lessons.
Golly.
Yep. And then I learned how the power of community. Like, our church rallied around us. Billy Graham Association came out to our property and prayed over us. Like they showed up, like Samaritan's Purse showed up to sift our property, and there was like 4 cargo vans, and my wife's like, are they all for us? I'm like, this is insane. She's like, yeah, we're normally the helpers. She's like, this feels completely out of sorts, right? So it was learning resourcing. It was learning how to be calm. It was learning courage. It was learning grit. It was learning all these things. And here's the greatest testament, fellas. A year later, we're driving by the La Quinta Hotel, where Pizza Hut used to be. I don't know if you're from here, Tyler. But my daughter was like, hey, that's the hotel we stayed at when we got evacuated. That was the best 2 weeks of my life. I got to sleep with you guys every night. We had breakfast together every morning. We went and swam in the pool every evening. And I'm like, what does that tell you about how we were able to insulate them from the chaos?
And isn't it telling about her perspective on what is important in life?
Right.
Well, and how dangerous projecting our feelings onto kids can be. Right? If mom and dad are at peace, hell can be around them. Kids are going to feel that peace vibe, and they're going to be like, that was a great day. Wow.
Dude, that hotel room was brutal. Like, 5 people, 4 dogs. Like, it was brutal.
How old was your daughter at that time?
18. She's 10 now, so 7.
7 years old, man. That is a party that won't stop. All For 5 of you and 4 dogs, man. She's like, this is heaven on earth right here.
But I can tell you too, I'm getting a little nostalgic thinking about that day, because it turned. Right? I had a hotel with a dog allowance, and like 2 or 3 in the afternoon, I canceled my reservation because the fire had changed.
Yeah.
Right. And it looked like we were going to be fine. And by 7 o'clock that night, we were anything but fine. and
Right.
West Reading was evacuated.
Yep.
Right. And I love that.
It was scary.
I love that because I mean, I can obviously relate because it's a shared experience, but I just love it's like the thankful leper, Tyler.
Yeah.
Right. Like, where are the 9? Like, who else can see it like this? Because I can tell you, Chris, you and I both know people that haven't recovered from that.
Yep.
They haven't done the work, right? They've done retail therapy and replaced things that were lost, but they haven't done the work of the loss.
Correct.
And of the dealing with that. I love that. You know, we talked a little bit about honoring your parents. I want to make sure that in this space, is there anybody else, as you look at where you're at in life right now around you, that you want to honor?
You know, and I think this is one of those things where it's something that I'm going to have to make a concerted effort to resolve, because the way I'm living my life is very similar to my family of origin, right? It's kind of that blueprint. My folks were very isolated. They were both the black sheep of their family. We live in California. My dad's from Illinois. My mom's from Maui. They were both looking to get away from their families. So there wasn't a lot of family connection, right? So when you're like, okay, who's your Mount Rushmores? Like, I can point to some bosses along the way. Like, I can point to people that Jesus put in my life that helped me to make better choices. But this was probably the one question I was like, I hope they don't ask me, because I don't know, right? And so the people that like I look to, like the Mount Rushmore people, they're like David Goggins, right? They're people who have overcome like huge things, like the movie Maru. I don't know if you've seen that movie. They're mountain climbers, and they just do amazing things. And I'm like, you inspire me to get out of my comfort zone, right? So those are the people that I put on my Mount Rushmore. But do I? And then you know, tying it back into 24/7 Dad. Like the fifth principle of 24/7 Dad is community. Like, how many men live in isolation? Like, I'm raising my hand right now. Like, I pretty much live in isolation. Yeah, there's soccer dads I talk to. I got invited to a couple barbecues. Like, but depth of friendship. Kinda.
Yeah.
Right? It's my wife.
How did you
like
meet her?
Men.
How did you meet her?
School.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I just, you know, at Shasta Junior College, like bumming around. We were in a couple classes together, and then I saw her. Obviously, I'm like, ooh, she's really attractive. I want to know who she is. And then I had a class with her, and like I was like, here's my chance. So we started like hanging out together, doing some study groups together, and then kind of from there, like we were inseparable. Like she taught me how to be a student. She taught me a lot of things. She's taught me how to be a student. She's taught me how to be conscientious. She's taught me how to be submissive. She's taught me how to be sacrificing. She's taught me how to put other people first. Like, she's taught me a lot of really, like, she kind of broke the broken man, and, you know, inspired me to want to be better.
And what's her name?
Emily. She actually just wrote a book.
Really?
It's a parenting book.
Let's hear, what's the title of the book?
Yeah.
Hold on. Let me pull this up. You can get it on Amazon. Emily Scott, PhD.
Ah.
Yeah. I only have a master's degree.
Wow.
She outranks you.
She totally does. It's not being pulled up.
And we're going to include a link to that Amazon if we get that. Right, Mike?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll delete the long pause so that it'll sound like you got it right on the tip of your tongue.
Yeah.
31 days to renew your parenting.
Oh man.
It's a daily guided reflection to take you from surviving to thriving. So basically it's kind of like, it's one of those where you read some really good, informative, educational pointers, and research-based pointers, and then she has a bunch of process questions for you to answer. It's thought-provoking. It's a book where you interact with.
Yeah.
It's geared more for moms, but I mean, if you really want to understand moms, dads, read this book.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that.
Hey, Chris, how can people connect with your work?
So you can reach me at chris@chrisscottmft.com. You can go to guideposttherapy.com. I'm just starting up my Dads with Purpose. I have a Facebook group called Dads with Purpose, where I will do, memes, quotes. I'll do some Facebook Lives about what's really important for our children, like how to create connection, like what to ask your kid beyond how was your day, like how important attachment is and why you need to know what attachment is. So I try to keep it surface, but it's a group for dads who want to know how to take their dad game to the next level. And so when I say Dads with Purpose, the purpose is, how do we give our kids vision, mission for a purpose, right? Not a list of do's and don'ts, like don't lie, don't steal, like woefully inadequate, right? How do we teach our children character? How do we teach our children how to think? How do we teach our children how to break down what they believe about something? Why do you believe that? And then make wise choices based on who they are, not what their culture is telling them.
I'm gonna have to join that Facebook group, Mike Freeman.
That's so RMIT. I mean,
it is, man. I love it. I love it.
Seriously.
Man. Hey,
I've got this question, and I don't even know if I'm going to be able to say it the way I have it in my brain, but I want to throw this out there. Jotted it down pretty early in our conversation. I think that the challenge is sometimes shame enters the picture, especially as it relates to our relationship with our Savior. And sometimes we know he's perfect, but we know of him. We don't necessarily know him. And sometimes shame gets in the way of us reaching out and having a relationship with him. What would you say to that dilemma? What would you say to the person who's thinking, I can't possibly come to him the way I am right now?
Well, I think in that it's more of a process, like, okay, breaking down the belief system or the story that they're believing that's keeping them from that connection, right? So there's a intervention that I'll run in session. Like, it starts with, what is the behavior that you're getting that you don't want? What is the behavior leading to that outcome? What is the feeling leading to that behavior? What is the thought leading to that feeling? What is the belief leading to that thought? Now let's reframe that over here. What is a thought that you can have that gives you a different feeling, that gives you a different behavior, that gets you a different outcome? Right. So what is the thing that's creating shame? Right. So I think when I'm teaching what shame is it's a feeling that leads to fear of disconnection. Like, there's something wrong with me that is going to be rejected. So is that about God, or is that about experiences that you've had in your life where other people held you to a standard that it was based on behavior and not who you were?
Yeah. Again,
you didn't get straight A's.
Again, being.
You were a bad student.
Versus doing.
Right. But I'm a good person. I remember, like, when I played ice hockey, this memory just popped up. I remember this ref. His name was John Morris. And this is how powerful it was. Maybe this is a Hinge moment. Maybe he's a Rushmore dude. But I was in the lobby. I was 13, 14. My dad and I were sitting in the lobby. And this ref comes up and he looks at my dad. He's like, "Hey, is this your kid?" He's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I want you to know, like, he is the most polite kid. He's a great kid. You should be proud." And I was confused because that wasn't the message. The message was always like, you're not good enough. Hey, I got all A's and a B. You're supposed to have straight A's. Hey, I turned in, like, I got an A minus. You're supposed to have an A. Like, hey, I got right. So it was always like, what's that next? So I think if I want parents to understand, it's like, listen to the messages that you're giving to your children. Are we creating an environment where we're celebrating the behavior, what they're doing, or are we celebrating the child, who they are? Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
No, that's 100%. And Tyler, how many times have we talked about that internal script running between our ears, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Like, it's so valuable. And I think that too, the work of like somebody along the way has imprinted messages on us.
Right.
And those scripts run.
Right.
Right. And it's important that we deprogram if we've got some faulty script in there, because the script leads to the thinking, leads to the feeling, leads to the behavior, right? And it's also wrapped up in this thing we call identity. And Tyler, we've gone on and on and on about that, the power of who we are, because who we are is not subject to a mistake maybe that we made, but shame comes in and says, you did that thing one time. How dare you try to escape that?
Right.
You know, you're the mistake.
Right.
You know, you're made of junk.
And I think that's where I would start with them, if that answers the question about the shame keeping them away from Jesus. It's not Jesus.
Yeah. I love that.
It's not
but
Jesus.
Doing it from a place of compassion.
Yeah, it's not Jesus.
Absolutely.
It's the enemy throwing that tax strip down on your way to him, right? Like, how dare you try to go to him? Mm-hmm. You're this, right? You got to blast through that opposition. Yeah.
It's like that one, oh my goodness, against Lifehouse, the Lifehouse skit. Man, that video, like, it doesn't matter how many times I watch it. I'm like, I sit there and cry, right? Because it's like, who am I that deserves that? Like I identify so much with that girl. Like, I don't know which one you've watched, but that girl just making so many sad choices, and like Jesus sitting there in despair, and like, but he's always there, ready to, like, right as soon as I turn back around, he's like, yeah, look, here I am.
Yeah.
I'm always right there.
Tyler, it makes me think of Touch of the Master's Hand, right? It's an old auction, right? And there's this really beat up violin.
Yeah.
And it's like, who wants this? Who wants this? And like, nobody's taking it. And this master violinist gets up there and grabs it and plays this unbelievable, beautiful song with this beat up old violin. And then he puts it down, and it's like, now who wants it? And hands go up, right? And it's the same violin. It's just with the touch of a master's hand, the soul feels its worth, right? And changes the whole narrative.
Well, Chris, we're creeping up on the time when you should be in bed asleep. We're almost there, man. We almost ran right to it. But I got to tell you, first of all, I'm grateful for the time that you've given us, and I'm grateful that I know you, and I can call you a friend. I hope that's okay.
Oh, that's so good.
I appreciate you. But we end every show with the same question, and we've talked about richness. We've talked about what creates a rich life, and I'm curious what it means to you, Chris, to be considered the richest man in town.
That is such a deep and loaded question. But I think as I'm learning and just digging in every day, how can I experience life on a deeper level every day? And I keep coming back to my kids. It's that opening the door and hearing the screams, "Daddy's home." Right? It's the dogs jumping on me, and
heroes
big,
welcome,
man.
Right? Yeah.
Dude, it's great. Or, driving home from Weaverville after Thanksgiving dinner with the full moon and listening to the kids just be content in the back and hearing the hum of the car and just looking over in the moonlight at my wife and being like, holy smokes, like this is real. Right? Or just being able to do the job that I do, and just be honored that people are trusting me with their minds and their hearts to help them become better versions of themselves and overcome their anxiety or trauma, and get married or have kids or start a job that they've been trying to start. Like, man, it's not even about me. It's about what I get to experience with other people in my life.
Well, I appreciate that answer, and I'm grateful that you're doing what you're doing and impacting people's lives. So keep on doing it, man. This has been a blast for me, and it's been a learning experience for me. So I appreciate you. I appreciate
Tyler, can you think of a better bow to put on 2 hours with Chris than It's Not Even About Me?
No, I love that, man.
Like, that is to the DNA of this project.
Yeah.
Right? Losing ourselves. It's not about us. It's about this amazing opportunity that we have. We got one life, right?
Yep.
And it's about being the best version of ourselves so that we might be of service to someone else, right? Love that.
I love it, man.
I love painting the picture of some rich moments, man. We've all been there in the car when we look over and be like, how? Right? Pinch me right now. How in the world
is this real, man?
Can this be happening?
I love it. Well, look, we'll see you next week, right? So
send me the link. I think in paragraphs, so I can get wordy. But I appreciate you bringing me back.
This was fantastic, man. We appreciate you. Grateful for you, Chris. Grateful for who you are. Make sure you tell Emily that we appreciate her sacrificing her evening with you, and keep doing what you're doing.
Go to bed, man. You've earned it.
Thank you.
All right. Good night.
Good night.
My big brother George, the richest man in town.